On the night my family toasted my twin sister under sparkling lights for her 25th birthday, I lay on my floor with my lungs locking up. I realized I had been set up with a gift supposed to look like love. Then the paramedic leaned close and said my sister called dispatch before I did to claim I faked episodes for attention. That was when I understood the party was not just cruelty, it was the alibi. I am Bianca Baker, and if you are reading this, you probably know what it feels like to be the ghost in your own family photos. Turning 25 is supposed to be a milestone. It is the quarter-century mark, the moment your insurance rates drop, the year you are officially supposed to have it together. For my twin sister, Blair, it was a coronation. For me, it was the night I almost died on a beige rug I bought on sale, clawing at my throat while the people who made me celebrated my absence. I want to be clear about something right from the start. This is not a story about a misunderstanding. This is not about a busy family forgetting a birthday. This is about the moment I realized that while I was fighting for oxygen, my mother and sister were sipping champagne and cementing the narrative that would explain why I was dead. It started around 8 o'clock in the evening. The silence in my apartment was absolute. I had convinced myself that staying home was my choice, a quiet reclamation of the day. I had set up the new diffuser my sister had sent me, a peace offering. I thought and tried to read a book, but the air had turned thick, heavy. It tasted wrong, like metal and cloying lavender. By 8:30, my chest felt like it was wrapped in iron bands. By 8:45, I was on the floor. If you have never had a severe asthma attack, let me explain the terror. It is not just that you cannot breathe, it is that your body betrays you. Your lungs, which have done their job automatically for every second of your life, suddenly go on strike. You try to inhale, and it feels like sucking air through a coffee stirrer. Your vision tunnels. The edges of the world go gray, then black. Your heart hammers against your ribs like a trapped bird, terrified by the lack of fuel. I reached for my rescue inhaler. I clicked the canister. Nothing, just a hollow, mocking hiss. I shook it. It felt light, too light. I clicked it again. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my stomach. I knew I had filled this prescription 3 weeks ago. I knew I had barely used it, but as I lay there, gasping like a fish on a dock, the canister was empty. I dragged myself across the floor to my phone. My fingers were numb, vibrating with hypoxia. I dialed 911. 911? What is your emergency? Can't breathe, I wheezed. Asthma, severe. I managed to gasp out my address. The operator told me help was on the way. Her voice calm and detached, a lifeline in the dark. I dropped the phone and focused on staying conscious. I focused on the rhythm of the floorboards against my cheek. I focused on the injustice of dying alone on my birthday while 3 miles away, in a rented event tent that cost more than my car. A DJ was probably playing my sister's favorite song. The time between the call and the sirens was a blur of fragmented memories. I saw my mother, Lillian, adjusting Blair's sash at our 16th birthday party, while I stood in the background holding the coats. I saw my father, Wade, looking at the floor when I told him I got into college, terrified to celebrate me too loudly in case it upset the delicate ecosystem of our house. I saw my grandmother, Rosalind, the only one who ever looked at me and saw a person, not a problem. But Rosalind was in a hospital bed recovering from a stroke. Unreachable. I was truly alone. When the paramedics burst in, the influx of noise was overwhelming. They were efficient, loud, and alive. One of them, a man with a name tag that read, Nate, knelt beside me. He was young, focused, with eyes that didn't just look past me to the monitors. He looked at me. He placed the mask over my face. The nebulizer hissed. The first rush of medication hit my lungs, and the iron bands began to loosen. Just a fraction. I could feel the tears leaking out of my eyes. Not from sadness, but from the sheer physiological relief of oxygen hitting my blood. Nate checked my vitals, his gloved hands steady. He was asking standard questions to keep me conscious, to gauge my lucidity. Do you have any emergency contacts we should notify? Ms. Baker? he asked. He was checking my pupil response with a pen light. I tried to laugh, but it came out as a wet, wheezing cough. The bitterness in my mouth was stronger than the medicine. "My family," I rasped, my voice sounding like gravel. "But, good luck. They're at a party." Nate paused. He exchanged a look with his partner. A look I didn't understand at the time. It was a look of confusion, mixed with something darker. "We know," Nate said. His voice was careful, too careful. "Dispatch informed us." I frowned behind the plastic mask. "You know?" "We received a call about 10 minutes before yours," Nate said. He pulled the stethoscope from his ears and let it hang around his neck. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear, as if he knew what he was about to say was unprofessional but necessary. "A woman called from your number's family plan. She told the dispatcher to disregard any calls from this address tonight." The room seemed to tilt. The oxygen was flowing, but suddenly I felt suffocated all over again. "What?" I whispered. "She said—" Nate hesitated, looking at his clipboard, then back at me. He looked angry on my behalf. "She said you were having a tantrum because you weren't invited to a birthday event. She explicitly told dispatch that you fake asthma attacks for attention and that we shouldn't rush." The words hit me harder than the lack of air. Fake attacks. For attention. I closed my eyes, and the image of the party I wasn't at flooded my mind with high-definition clarity. I could see it. I knew exactly what it looked like because I had seen the planning emails Lillian had accidentally included me on before removing me from the thread. I could picture the white tent glowing on the lawn of the country club. I could see the tables draped in silver linen. I could see the signage, printed in elegant, swirling calligraphy. Blair's quarter century, not the twins' quarter century, just Blair's. I could see Blair standing there in the dress Lillian had bought her. A shimmering thing that caught the light, holding a glass of champagne, looking tragically beautiful. I could hear her voice, pitching perfectly between concern and annoyance, telling her friends, "Oh, I wish Bianca could be here, but you know how she is. She just spirals. It is better for her to be home where it is quiet." And then, I imagined her stepping away from the noise, holding her phone, dialing 911, not to save me, but to ensure that if I called, no one would believe me. She had called the police on my survival. "Ma'am?" Nate's hand was on my shoulder. "We need to transport you. Your oxygen saturation is still unstable." I opened my eyes. "She called first," I said, the realization hardening into something cold and solid in my chest. "She called first." "Yeah," Nate said grimly. "She did. Good thing we ignore advice from non-medical personnel. Let's get you on the stretcher." As they loaded me into the back of the ambulance, the vibration of the wheels on the pavement felt like a countdown. I stared up at the ceiling of the vehicle, watching the light streak past the windows. I thought about the gift on my table. I thought about the empty inhaler. I thought about the timing. For 25 years, I had told myself a story to survive. I told myself that my mother and sister were just difficult, that they were high maintenance, that Lillian was just a perfectionist and Blair was just needy. I told myself that I was the strong one, the independent one, and that their neglect was actually a form of respect for my capability. But you do not call 911 to block an ambulance for someone you respect. You do not tell dispatch your daughter is a liar when she is dying unless you have a reason to want her gone. This was the most terrifying part. The thought that made my blood run cold, even as the medicine warmed my lungs. I did not just feel unwanted. I felt strategically removed. It was the precision of it. The party wasn't just a celebration. It was a containment strategy. If everyone was at the party, all the witnesses, all the family friends, all the neighbors, then no one was watching me. If I died alone in my apartment, it would be a tragedy, a sad accident. "Poor Bianca," they would say over hors d'oeuvres at the funeral. "She always had such weak lungs, and she was so stubborn. She never asked for help until it was too late." They had the script written before the curtain even went up. I looked at Nate, who was monitoring my heart rate. They aren't going to come to the hospital, are they? I asked. Nate looked uncomfortable. We notified the emergency contact listed in your file, your mother. And? She said she couldn't leave the event immediately as she is the host, Nate said, his jaw tightening. She said she would come when things wound down. I let out a dry, humorless laugh that hurt my ribs. When things wound down, my life was hanging in the balance, and Lillian was worried about the flow of the cocktail hour. This is where I need to stop for a second and talk to you. Yes, you. If you are reading this and you have ever been the child who had to apologize for taking up space, stay with me. If you have ever been the one who had to beg for the bare minimum of affection while your sibling got a parade for waking up in the morning, listen to me. I know the instinct is to shrink. I know the instinct is to think. Maybe I am dramatic. Maybe I am too much. Maybe if I just stay quiet, they will finally love me. I stayed quiet for 25 years. I made myself small. I accepted the scraps. And tonight, that silence almost put me in a morgue. So if you are watching this unfold, hit that like button. Leave a comment. Tell me where you are watching from, because we are about to go on a ride. And I need witnesses. I need you to see what happens next, because they are counting on the fact that no one is looking. They rely on the privacy of family matters. They rely on the shame victims feel. They rely on the idea that blood is thicker than water, even when that blood is being used to drown you. But as the ambulance turned the corner toward Lakeview Mercy Medical Center, my fear began to transmute. It stopped being the shaking, trembling terror of a victim and started becoming the cold, hard resolve of a survivor. My grandmother, Rosalind, had told me something a few months ago. Before the stroke took her voice away, we were sitting in her sunroom, drinking tea, and she had looked at me with a lucid, piercing intensity. "Bianca," she had said, "there is a man named Elliot Carver. He is an attorney. I never introduced you, and I kept him separate from your mother for a reason. But if things ever turn ugly, if you ever feel like you are cornered, you find him. He knows what to do." At the time, I thought she was being dramatic. Rosalind was old. She had a flair for the theatrical. I thought she meant ugly, like a fight over china patterns or holiday schedules. I didn't know she meant ugly, like attempted murder. I lay back on the stretcher and closed my eyes. The oxygen mask fogged with each breath. In, out, in, out. Every breath was a victory. Every beat of my heart was an act of rebellion. They were at the party right now. Lillian was probably making a toast. Blair was probably laughing, throwing her head back, confident that her little problem was being handled by the silence of my apartment. They thought I was gone, or, at the very least, they thought I would be cowed. They thought I would wake up in the hospital, ashamed, groggy, and accept their gaslighting. They expected me to apologize for ruining their night. They thought I would be too weak to prove what they did. They were wrong. The ambulance slowed, backing into the emergency bay. The doors flew open, revealing the stark clinical lights of the hospital. I wasn't just entering a hospital. I was entering a war zone. But this time, I wasn't going to be the casualty. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool night air mixed with exhaust fumes. It was the sweetest thing I had ever tasted. I was alive, and as long as I was alive, I was a threat. My name is Bianca Baker. I just turned 25, and my birthday wish is simple. I am going to burn their perfect little world to the ground, and I am going to use the truth as my match, to understand the party, and why my lungs seizing up on my 25th birthday was not an accident, but a schedule. You have to go back 4 weeks. You have to understand the hierarchy of the Baker family, a structure as rigid and unforgiving as a corporate ladder, where I was permanently stuck in the mailroom while my sister sat in the corner office. It began on a Tuesday. I was at my desk at Marrowstone Benefits Group. I work as a compliance analyst. It is not a glamorous job. It does not come with galas or glitter. It involves staring at spreadsheets, cross-referencing regulations, and finding the tiny, hairline fractures in a company's policy before they turn into lawsuits. I am good at it because I have spent my entire life trying to follow invisible rules. I have spent a quarter of a century trying to be compliant, hoping that if I just followed the protocol perfectly enough, I would finally be approved. I was in the middle of auditing a travel expense report when my phone buzzed. It was a local landline number. My stomach dropped. Millennials do not call each other, and spammers usually call from spoofed cell numbers. A local landline means trouble. It was Mrs. Higgins, my grandmother Rosalind's next-door neighbor. "Bianca, honey," she said, and her voice was shaking. "The ambulance just left. It is your grandmother. I found her in the garden. She wasn't waking up." I did not pack my bag. I did not shut down my computer. I grabbed my keys and ran. The drive to Lakeview Mercy Medical Center was a blur of aggressive lane changes and terrified prayers. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, bargaining with a universe that rarely listened to me. Take anything, I thought. Take my job. Take my apartment. Just do not take her. Rosalind Klein was not just my grandmother. She was my person. In a family that treated affection like a limited currency to be hoarded, Rosalind was a spendthrift. She was the only one who didn't look at Blair and see a princess, then look at me and see the spare parts. She called me Steady B. Everyone else in this family is a hurricane, Bianca. She used to tell me over cups of Earl Grey tea in her sunroom. The air smelling of lavender and old paper. They spin and they destroy. But you are the ground. You are the steady one. When I arrived at the hospital, the receptionist directed me to the neurological intensive care unit. The hallway was quiet, smelling of antiseptic and floor wax. I found her room, and the sight of her stopped me dead in the doorway. Rosalind looked small. That was the most shocking thing. She was a woman of immense presence, a former history professor who could silence a room with a raised eyebrow. Now, she looked like a fragility experiment, wired up to machines that beeped in a rhythmic, indifferent tempo. Her face was slack on the left side. I pulled a plastic chair to the bedside and took her hand. It felt cold and dry, like parchment paper. "I am here, Grams," I whispered. "Steady B is here." I sat there for 40 minutes alone. That was typical. I was always the first responder to the family's emotional disasters, while the others were the press team who showed up for the cameras. My parents arrived nearly an hour later. Lillian Baker, my mother, did not look like she had rushed. She looked like she had curated an outfit for a tragedy. She was wearing a slate gray blazer and tailored trousers. Her hair coiffed into an immovable helmet of blonde highlights. There was no mascara running down her face. There was no shortness of breath. My father, Wade, trailed behind her. Wade was a man who had mastered the art of being furniture. He was tall, broad, and utterly silent. He avoided conflict the way most people avoid fire. If Lillian was the shark, Wade was the water. He didn't bite, but he allowed her to move effortlessly. "Is she conscious?" Lillian asked. That was her first sentence. Not "how is she?" or "is she in pain?" Just a query about status. "No," I said, not letting go of Rosalind's hand. "The doctor said it was a massive stroke. They are monitoring brain swelling." Lillian sighed, a sound of irritation rather than grief. She set her designer bag on the windowsill, checking the surface for dust first. I knew this would happen. I told her that gardening in the heat was irresponsible at her age. She never listens. "She had a stroke. Mom," I said, my voice tight. "She didn't decide to have it." Lillian ignored me. She was already scanning the room, looking at the monitors, the IV drip, the chart at the foot of the bed. She looked like she was inspecting a hotel room that didn't meet her standards. Then, the door opened, and the performance truly began. Blair swept in. My twin sister has a way of entering a room that demands you look at her. She was wearing a pristine white athleisure set, phone in one hand, car keys in the other. Her hair was a glossy waterfall over her shoulders. She looked frantic, but in a cinematic way, breathless, eyes wide and glistening, lips parted. "Oh my God," she gasped, rushing to the other side of the bed. She didn't touch Rosalind. She hovered over her, framing herself in the potential line of sight of anyone walking by. Is she… Oh, Grams. She lifted her phone. For a second, I thought she was calling a doctor. Then I saw the thumb swipe. She was checking her notifications. She slipped the phone into her pocket, but kept her hand on it, as if the device was her actual lifeline. I got here as fast as I could, Blair said, looking at Lillian. Not Rosalind. Traffic was a nightmare on the interstate. I was literally shaking the whole way. It is okay, sweetheart, Lillian cooed, her voice instantly shifting from administrative coldness to maternal warmth. She walked over and rubbed Blair's back. You are here now. That is what matters. Don't upset yourself. You know stress triggers your migraines. I sat on the other side of the bed, gripping Rosalind's cold hand harder. I had been there for an hour, terrified. I had driven like a maniac. But Blair's traffic jam was the tragedy of the day. A doctor walked in, a tired-looking man with a tablet. Dr. Aris, according to his badge. Family of Rosalind Klein? He asked. Yes, Lillian said, stepping forward, effectively blocking me from the doctor's view. I am her daughter, Lillian Baker. This is my husband and my children. She grouped Blair and me together, but she stood next to Blair. Your mother has suffered a significant ischemic stroke. Doctor, Aris said, we have stabilized her, but the next 48 hours are critical. We are seeing some swelling, and her responsiveness is currently 0. We need to discuss the care plan and potential interventions. I leaned forward, desperate to ask about her chances of waking up, about the therapy options, about the window for recovery, but Lillian spoke first. Doctor, before we get into the medical weeds, she said, her voice dropping to a confidential, serious register. We need to clarify the paperwork situation. There is some confusion about the medical proxy and the estate access. If she is incapacitated, we need to know who has the authority to sign for billing and asset management. The air left the room. Assets. Rosalind was lying there, her brain fighting for survival, and Lillian was asking about accessing the bank accounts. Doctor? Aris blinked, clearly caught off guard by the pivot. Ma'am, our priority right now is her survival. The social worker can discuss the power of attorney with you later, but usually it defaults to the next of kin unless otherwise specified. Right, Lillian said, and I saw a flicker of tension in her jaw. But if she has a lawyer, or if she updated anything recently, we would need to know that immediately, for her sake, to make sure her bills are paid. I am sure her bills can wait a day. Mom, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. Lillian turned to look at me. It was the first time she had made direct eye contact with me since entering. Her eyes were like blue glass, hard, transparent, and cold. Bianca, she said, with a tone one uses for a slow child or a disobedient dog, we are adults here. We have to think about the logistics. Emotions do not pay the hospital invoice. She is not an invoice, I snapped. She is your mother. Don't start. Blair sighed from across the bed. She rolled her eyes, checking her nails. God, Bianca, why do you always have to make everything a fight? Mom is just being practical. You are so dramatic. There it was. The word that had followed me since kindergarten. Dramatic. If I cried when I was hurt, I was dramatic. If I defended myself, I was dramatic. If I pointed out that they were stripping the carcass of my grandmother's dignity before she was even dead, I was dramatic. Doctor, Aris looked uncomfortable. I will let you all have a moment. I will return in an hour to check her vitals. He left, fleeing the toxicity of room 402. Lillian immediately turned to Wade. We need to call the house manager. We need to find the file cabinet keys. If she is going to be in here for weeks, the house cannot just sit there. And we need to find the current copy of the will. I stood up. I couldn't breathe. The air in the room felt recycled and thin. I am going to get coffee. I lied. I walked out into the hallway. But I didn't go far. I leaned against the wall just outside the door, trembling. I knew I shouldn't listen. I knew compliance meant walking away. But for once, I didn't comply. I stood there and I listened. She looks terrible, Blair's voice drifted out. Mom, what if she needs long-term care? That is going to drain the inheritance. Nursing homes are like $10,000 a month. Keep your voice down, Lillian hissed. But she didn't disagree. She didn't say, we will spend every penny to save her. Instead, she said, I need to find out if she changed the executor. She mentioned meeting with a new lawyer last year, some man named Carver. I never met him. If she changed the trust structure, we need to get ahead of it. What about Bianca? Wade's voice mumbled. It was rare to hear him speak. She is attached to her mother. Bianca doesn't know anything about finance, Lillian scoffed. She is a compliance drone. She checks boxes. She doesn't manage estates. Besides, we can't have her involved in the decision-making. She is too unstable. Look at her today. She is practically vibrating. If we let her make medical decisions, she will keep Mother on life support for 20 years just to avoid saying goodbye. So, what do we do? Blair asked. We have a care meeting, Lillian said decisively. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, at the house. Bianca works at 9, Wade said. I know, Lillian replied. The silence that followed was heavy. It wasn't an oversight. It was the point. We will handle the decisions. We will tell her what the plan is later. It is better that way. She gets overwhelmed so easily. We are doing her a favor. I slid down the wall until I was crouching on the linoleum. They were planning the meeting specifically when I couldn't be there. They were using my job, my responsibility, my steadiness against me. They were going to carve up Rosalind's life and legacy while I was auditing expense reports. And then they would present it to me as a done deal. It wasn't just that they didn't respect me. It was that they viewed me as an obstacle to be managed, routed around, and neutralized. I thought about the last time I saw Rosalind conscious. It was 2 days before the stroke. We were sitting on her porch. She had looked at me, watching me try to fix a loose board on her steps because Wade hadn't gotten around to it in 6 months. She had put her hand on my shoulder, stopped me, and looked me right in the eye. Bianca, she had said, her voice fierce and clear. You spend so much time trying to earn your place in that house. You clean up their messes. You keep their secrets. You make yourself invisible so they won't trip over you. I just want them to see I am good, I had replied. Rosalind had shook her head. Honey, listen to me. When people love you, they don't make you audition. Sitting on the hospital floor, listening to my mother worry about the price of a nursing home and my sister worry about the inheritance, the truth of that sentence finally cracked my heart open. I had been auditioning for 25 years. I had learned the lines. I had worn the costumes. I had played the role of the good daughter, the quiet sister, the steady one. But the cast list had been posted a long time ago, and my name was never going to be on it. I stood up. I wiped my face. I didn't go back into the room. I walked down the hall to the elevator, my heels clicking a sharp, angry rhythm on the tile. I went back to work. I went back to my spreadsheets. But something had changed. Lillian was right about one thing. I was a compliance analyst. I was trained to find discrepancies. I was trained to spot when the numbers didn't add up. And as I drove away from the hospital, leaving my family to plot over my grandmother's unconscious body, I realized I had been auditing the wrong people. I wasn't going to audition anymore. I was going to start an investigation. And I had no idea that in 4 weeks, that investigation would end with me gasping for air on my living room floor. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house in a state of high-alert anxiety. The house itself was a sprawling colonial in the wealthiest subdivision of the county, a place of manicured hedges and windows that looked like unblinking eyes. I parked my hatchback behind Blair's brand-new convertible, a stark visual representation of our standing in the family hierarchy. My car had a dent in the bumper from a parking garage pillar. Hers looked like it had been licked clean by angels. I let myself in. The air inside was chilled to a precise 68 degrees, smelling of lemon polish and aggressive cleanliness. There was no warmth here, only presentation. I found them in the formal living room. The setup stopped me in my tracks. It did not look like a family gathering to discuss a tragedy. It looked like a tribunal. Lillian sat in the high-backed velvet armchair by the fireplace, her posture rigid, looking every inch the presiding judge. Blair was perched on the sofa to her right, legs crossed at the ankle, looking demure and smug. Wade, my father, was relegated to a wooden chair in the corner, fading into the beige wallpaper, his eyes fixed on a spot on the carpet. There was no empty chair for me. I pulled a dining chair from the other room and placed it in the center of the rug. Facing them, I felt like a defendant. "You are late," Lillian said. She did not look at her watch. She just stated it as a fact to establish dominance. "I am on time," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "You said 9 o'clock. It is 9 o'clock. We have already started," Blair said, examining her cuticles. "We didn't want to waste the morning." Lillian cleared her throat, signaling that the court was in session. "We need to settle the matter of your grandmother's medical management. Doctor, Aris needs a primary point of contact, someone to sign the forms, someone to make the difficult decisions if it comes to that." "I will do it," I said immediately. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "I am the logical choice, Mom. I know her entire medical history. I know her dosage for the blood pressure medication. I know she's allergic to sulfa drugs. I know she wants aggressive physical therapy but refuses long-term life support if there is no brain activity. We have discussed this." I looked at Wade, hoping for backup. "Dad, you know this. I go to her appointments. I take notes." Wade shifted in his chair, the wood creaking, but he didn't look up. Lillian let out a short, sharp sigh, as if I had just suggested we let a golden retriever perform neurosurgery. "Bianca, be realistic. This role requires stability. It requires someone who can present a calm, unified front to the medical team. You are, well, you are you." "What is that supposed to mean?" I asked, feeling the heat rise in my neck. "It means you are fragile," Blair chimed in. Her voice was sweet, syrup laced with arsenic. "You are emotional. Remember last Thanksgiving? You got so worked up you had to leave the table." "I had an asthma attack," I said, my voice rising, "because Mom insisted on filling the house with fresh lilies, and I am highly allergic." "I didn't get worked up, my airways closed." Blair turned to Lillian, eyebrows raised in a see what I mean gesture. "See? She is raising her voice already. She is hysterical." "I am not hysterical," I said, forcing myself to lower my volume, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "I am managing a chronic respiratory condition. That does not make me incompetent to sign a consent form." Lillian smoothed a non-existent wrinkle on her slacks. "It is not just the asthma, Bianca. It is the drama that surrounds it. Every time something happens, you have an episode. We can't have you collapsing in the ICU and making the doctors focus on you instead of Mother. It is a distraction." I stared at them. They were rewriting my biology as a personality flaw. They were framing my survival reflex as a bid for the spotlight. "So, who then?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Who is the stable one?" "Blair," Lillian announced. "She is poised. She is articulate. She handles pressure with grace. And honestly, she presents better. The doctors will respect her authority." I looked at Blair, my twin sister, who had called the stroke inconvenient because of the traffic. Blair, who couldn't name a single medication Rosalind took. "She doesn't know anything about Graham's health," I argued, desperation creeping in. "She will have to call me every time they ask a question. Why put a middleman between the doctors and the information?" "I am a quick learner," Blair said with a shrug. "Besides, I won't be emotional about it. I can make the hard calls without gasping." She pantomimed a small cough. a mockery of the thing that had sent me to the ER 3 times in the last decade. "It is decided," Lillian said, closing the subject with a wave of her hand. "Blair is the proxy. We will inform the hospital legal team this afternoon. Now, on to the next item." I sat back, stunned. I had just been fired from caring for the woman who raised me. But Lillian wasn't done. She picked up a glossy folder from the side table. "As you know," Lillian said, her tone brightening artificially, "this weekend is the girl's birthday. The girl's, plural." "Yes," I said, wary. "Turning 25 is a significant milestone," Lillian continued. "It is the start of real adulthood. Your father and I wanted to do something special, something that reflects the status of this family." She opened the folder. Inside were samples of linen, a menu printed on heavy cardstock, and a mock-up of a floral arrangement that looked like it cost more than my monthly rent. "We have booked the garden pavilion at the country club," she said. "We have hired the caterer from the governor's ball. It is going to be an elegant evening. Champagne, a string quartet playing pop covers, the works. We are inviting about 200 people." For a split second, a foolish, childish hope bloomed in my chest. Maybe this was the olive branch. Maybe, in the face of Rosalind's mortality, they realized life was short and they wanted to celebrate us, both of us. "That sounds nice," I said, cautiously. "Do you need me to help with the invites?" Lillian froze. She looked at Blair. Blair bit her lip to hide a smile. "Oh, Bianca," Lillian said, her voice dropping to that pitying register she reserved for disappointments. "You misunderstood." The room went silent. The clock on the mantel ticked, loud, rhythmic, counting down the seconds of my humiliation. "The party is for Blair," Lillian said. I blinked. "I'm sorry?" "It is Blair's quarter-century celebration," Lillian clarified. "Look at the signage." She pointed to a design sheet. "Blair's big 2 to 5. My name was nowhere. "But we are twins," I said. It was a stupid thing to say, a factual statement that felt like a question. "It is my birthday, too." "We know that, obviously," Blair said, rolling her eyes. "But be real. Bianca, you hate parties. You hate crowds. You get anxious. You would just stand in the corner clutching your inhaler and making everyone uncomfortable. We didn't want to put you through that." "You didn't want to put me through that?" I repeated. "Or you didn't want me in the photos?" Lillian sighed, looking exhausted by my existence. "Bianca, stop making this about you. This is Blair's moment. She has had a hard year with her career transitions." Blair had been fired from 3 internships. "She needs a win. We want to give her a night where she can shine without any complications." Complications. That was me. I was the complication. "So, what am I supposed to do?" I asked. My voice was barely a whisper. "Am I invited as a guest? At my own birthday party?" Lillian looked at Wade again. Wade stared at the carpet pattern, studying the weave as if the secrets of the universe were hidden in the beige wool. "Actually," Lillian said, "we think it would be best if you didn't attend." The sentence hung in the air like smoke. "Excuse me?" "Stay home," Lillian said. Her voice was flat, final. "Nobody wants you there. Bianca, it will be awkward. People will ask why the party is only for Blair, and then we will have to explain, and it will just cast a shadow over the night. Just stay at your apartment. We will send you a cupcake. Order some takeout. Treat yourself to a quiet night. It is what you prefer anyway." I looked at my father. "Dad?" I said. "Dad, are you hearing this? You are banning me from our birthday?" Wade Baker lifted his head slowly. He looked at Lillian, then at Blair, and finally, for a fleeting second, at me. I saw the conflict in his eyes, the weak flutter of a conscience trying to ignite. But then he looked at Lillian's face, the set jaw, the cold eyes, and the spark died. He said nothing. He looked back down at his hands. His silence hit me harder than Lillian's words. Lillian was a predator. That was her nature. Blair was a parasite. That was hers. But Wade? Wade was the witness who refused to testify. His silence was a signature on the death warrant of my place in this family. I stood up. My legs felt numb. "Okay," I said. "Okay?" Blair asked, looking disappointed that I wasn't screaming. She wanted the show. She wanted the hysterical sister to validate her story. "Okay," I repeated. "I understand." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I realized, with a sudden, crystalline clarity, that arguing was useless. You cannot negotiate with people who have already erased you. This wasn't neglect. Neglect is forgetting to water a plant. This was active. This was pruning. They were cutting off the branch they didn't like to make the tree look better for the neighbors. It was coordination, the proxy decision, the party, the exclusion. It was a systematic dismantling of my agency and my identity. "Good," Lillian said, picking up her pen. "I am glad you are being reasonable for once. Now, if you will excuse us, we have a caterer to call." I walked out of the house. I walked past the family photos in the hallway, the ones where I was always in the back row, or slightly out of focus, or cropped out entirely. I walked out the front door and got into my dented car. I didn't go back to work. I drove to my apartment, walked inside, and sat on the floor. I felt hollowed out. I felt like a ghost who had just been told she was haunting the wrong house. I needed to feel close to someone who actually loved me. I went to my closet and pulled out a shoebox I kept on the top shelf. It was filled with things Rosalind had given me over the years. Birthday cards, old photos, trinkets. I started sifting through them, looking for the version of myself that she saw. I found a birthday card for my 21st. To my steady B. "The world is lucky to have you." I found a photo of us in her garden, her arm around my shoulder, both of us laughing with dirt on our faces. And then, stuck between the pages of an old leather-bound journal she had given me, I found a folded piece of stationery. It wasn't a card. It was a note, written on her personal letterhead. The date at the top was from 2 years ago. The handwriting was shaky, different from her usual elegant script, as if she had written it in a hurry or in secret. "Bianca," it read, "if you are reading this, I am likely not there to protect you anymore. I know your mother. I know your sister. I love them. But I'm not blind to what they are. They see value in things, not people. And they have never understood the value of you. There is a man named Elliot Carver. He is an attorney in the city. He has the paperwork. He has the truth. I have instructed him to only step in if necessary. But I fear it will be. Trust him when things turn ugly. Do not let them silence you. Love, Grams." I stared at the paper. The ink was blue. The smell of her lavender perfume still clung faintly to the fiber. Trust him when things turn ugly. I looked around my empty apartment. I thought about the care meeting I wasn't invited to. I thought about the party I was banned from. I thought about Blair's smirk and Lillian's cold command. Nobody wants you there. Things hadn't just turned ugly. They had turned dangerous. I folded the note and put it in my pocket. My hands were shaking. But this time, it wasn't from asthma. It was from adrenaline. They thought they had cut me off. They thought they had isolated me. But Rosalind had left me a weapon, buried in a shoebox, waiting for the moment the war began. And the war had just begun. The evening before my 25th birthday, the silence in my apartment was not peaceful. It was heavy. It was the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums, reminding you exactly how much space you are not taking up in the world. I had spent the last 24 hours trying to convince myself that I did not care. I told myself that a solo birthday was sophisticated. I told myself that pizza and a documentary were better than small talk and shapewear. But the human heart is a traitorous thing. It wants to be known. It wants to be celebrated. And knowing that tomorrow, 200 people would be raising a glass to my genetic duplicate while I sat here alone, it hurt in a way that felt physical, like a bruise pressing on a nerve. I was in the kitchen, rinsing a mug, when a sharp knock on the door made me jump. My pulse spiked instantly. I was not expecting anyone. My building is secure, which meant someone had either buzzed themselves in or slipped past the front desk. I walked to the door, checking the peephole. The hallway was empty. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door slowly. There was no one there, but sitting on the welcome mat, perfectly centered, was a box. It was not a standard brown shipping box. It was sleek, wrapped in matte black paper with a silver ribbon. It looked expensive. It looked like an apology. I brought it inside and set it on my kitchen island. The card tucked under the ribbon was cream-colored heavy stock. I recognized the stationery. It was from the set Lillian had bought Blair for Christmas, personalized with her initials in gold foil. I opened the envelope. The message was short. Love you. Sorry for everything. Blair. I stared at the ink. I traced the loop of the B with my fingertip. Something about it felt off. Blair's handwriting was usually jagged, rushed, the script of someone who had better places to be. This was careful. The letters were rounder, more deliberate. It looked like Blair's handwriting, but it also looked like someone trying to write like Blair. Or maybe it was just that I had never seen her write an apology before, so I didn't know what the font of remorse looked like. Sorry for everything. It was such a broad, sweeping phrase. Sorry for what? Sorry for the tribunal yesterday? Sorry for the exclusion? Sorry for 25 years of treating me like a garnish on the main dish of her life? Or was it a sorry for the fact that she was about to have the night of her life without me? I cut the ribbon, inside the box, nestled in black shredded paper, was a device that looked like a smooth white stone. It was an essential oil diffuser, but high-end. The brand name, Eris Pure, was stamped on the side in minimalist gray text. Next to it was a small amber bottle labeled Deep Breath, Respiratory Support Blend. I picked up the bottle. The label promised a hypoallergenic, clean air formula designed to soothe airways and promote deep relaxation. My instincts, sharpened by a lifetime of navigating my family's passive-aggressive minefields, pricked up. Blair did not send gifts. Blair received gifts. And she certainly didn't send wellness products. Blair thought allergies were a mindset, and that asthma was something you could yoga your way out of. Why this? Why now? I sat on a bar stool, turning the bottle over in my hand. The rational part of my brain was screaming. It was saying, this is a prop. This is a consolation prize so she can tell her friends. I even sent her a spa gift, while she drinks champagne. But then, the lonely part of my brain, the part that was 5 years old and just wanted my sister to hold my hand, started to whisper. Maybe she feels guilty. Maybe she realized she went too far yesterday. Maybe this is her way of trying to take care of you, in the only way she knows how. The respiratory support labeling felt targeted. Yes, but maybe it was thoughtful? Maybe she had actually Googled gifts for asthmatics and bought this? The idea that my sister might have spent 5 minutes thinking about my comfort was a drug I wanted to take. I decided to vet it. I am a compliance analyst. Verification is my love language. I looked at the box for a customer service number. There was a 1800 number printed in small font on the bottom. I dialed it, putting my phone on speaker. Thank you for calling, a robotic voice said. The mailbox is full. Goodbye. Click. I frowned. No company name? No menu options? Just a full voicemail box? It was weird. It felt like a shell company, or one of those drop shipping brands that exist for a week on Instagram and then vanish. I put the phone down. I should have thrown the thing in the trash right then. I should have listened to the cold prickle on the back of my neck. But I was tired. I was emotionally exhausted from the hospital visits, the family meeting, and the looming weight of the birthday. I wanted to believe in the olive branch. I wanted to believe that I wasn't entirely alone. I left the box on the counter and walked over to the sofa, collapsing onto the cushions. I made the mistake of opening Instagram. It was a flood, a deluge. Blair had been posting nonstop for the last 3 hours. Story 1. A boomerang video of a massive floral arch being erected at the country club. Caption: Building the dream. Story 2. A close-up of the custom cocktails. The Blair Iney, and the quarter-century sour. Story 3. A selfie of Blair and Lillian. They were standing in the venue. The lighting perfect, their smiles identical. Lillian looked proud. Blair looked triumphant. And then, the caption on her latest post, a photo of the empty tables set for dinner. Cannot wait to celebrate tomorrow with my absolute favorite humans. Only the people I love most in the world. Blessed quarter century. Only the people I love most. I stared at the screen until the pixels blurred. I wasn't there. Therefore, I was not a person she loved most. It was a public declaration of my status. It was a digital eviction notice from the family heart. I threw my phone to the other end of the couch. The pain was sharp, hot, and suffocating. It wasn't just jealousy. It was grief. I was mourning the sister I never had. I was mourning the mother who couldn't see me. I looked back at the kitchen island. The white diffuser sat there, gleaming under the pendant light. Fine, I said to the empty room. If that is all I get, I will take it. I decided I would use it tomorrow. I would make my own ritual. I would order my favorite Thai food, put on comfortable pajamas, turn on the diffuser with its calming scent, and I would breathe. I would celebrate my own survival. I went to bed early, hoping to sleep through the midnight turnover so I wouldn't be awake when the date changed. But sleep was not kind. I dreamt of Rosalind, in the dream. I was standing in the hallway of my apartment building. The lights were flickering, buzzing like angry hornets. At the end of the hall, standing in front of my door, was my grandmother. She was wearing the hospital gown, but she was standing upright, strong. Her face was contorted with urgency. She was pointing at my door, at the number 4B. She was shouting something, but there was no sound. I tried to run to her, but the hallway stretched out like taffy, getting longer with every step. Rosalind's eyes were wide, terrified. She pointed at the door, then at her own throat. She grabbed her neck, miming choking. She was mouthing words. Don't. Then, the door to my apartment opened on its own, and a thick, gray fog rolled out, swallowing her whole. I woke up gasping. I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Thump, thump, thump. My sheets were tangled around my legs, damp with sweat. I coughed, a dry hacking sound. My chest felt tight. Not an attack, just residue. The ghost of the dream pressing on my lungs. I reached for the nightstand, my hand fumbling in the dark for my rescue inhaler. I kept it there, always. It was my safety net. I found the plastic actuator and gripped it. I brought it to my lips, ready to take a preventative puff, just to settle the nerves. But as I lifted it, I paused. It felt light. I frowned, the darkness of the room pressing in. I gave it a shake. Usually, a full or even half-full inhaler has a specific sensation, a liquid sloshing, a dense weight inside the metal canister. This felt hollow. It rattled, but it felt like the rattle of near emptiness. I turned on the bedside lamp, squinting against the sudden yellow glare. I pulled the metal canister out of the plastic casing. I shook it again. It didn't make sense. I had refilled this prescription 3 weeks ago. I am not a heavy user. I use it maybe once or twice a week for minor tightness. It should have been at least 80% full. I stared at the little metal cylinder. Had I used it more than I thought? Had it leaked? My mind, still groggy from the nightmare, started to rationalize. You have been stressed, Bianca. You have been taking puffs without thinking about it. You probably used it in the car after the hospital visits. You are just paranoid. I looked at the counter on the back. It was an old model. It didn't have the dose counter. I had to guess. It is fine, I whispered to myself. There is enough. I put the canister back in the casing and took a puff. A spray came out. Weak, but present. The medicine hit the back of my throat. Bitter and familiar. My airways relaxed slightly. See? I told myself. It works. You are just spiraling. Blair is right. You are dramatic. I put the inhaler back on the nightstand. I turned off the light. I lay back down, pulling the duvet up to my chin. But as I stared at the ceiling, waiting for sleep to return, I couldn't shake the feeling of the weight, or the lack of it. It felt like picking up a carton of milk you expect to be full, only to almost throw it over your shoulder because it is empty. In the kitchen, the white box sat on the counter, waiting for morning. In the bedroom, the lighter-than-air inhaler sat on the nightstand, waiting for an emergency. And outside, the world turned toward February 3rd, my birthday, the day I was supposed to celebrate life. I closed my eyes, telling myself that the tightness in my chest was just anxiety. I told myself that the dream was just a dream. I told myself that tomorrow would be a quiet, peaceful day. I was wrong about all of it. February 3rd began not with a bang, but with a suffocating silence. I woke up at 7 o'clock in the morning. The first thing I did, out of a habit I could not break, was reach for my phone. I expected something, a generic text from an aunt, a courtesy email from a dentist, maybe, just maybe, a message from my father sent from the bathroom while Lillian wasn't looking. The screen was blank, no notifications, no missed calls. I unlocked it and checked my messages. The last text I had received was a 2-factor authentication code from my bank 3 days ago. I opened social media, and there was the noise. The silence in my apartment was inversely proportional to the volume of my sister's life online. Her feed was a real-time documentary of her ascent. There were videos of the makeup artist arriving at 6:30 in the morning. There were photos of the mimosa bar being set up. There were reposts of friends saying, "Happy birthday to the Queen." I scrolled through 20 posts. My name was not in a single caption. I was not tagged. I was not mentioned. It was as if Blair had been born an only child. I spent the day existing in the margins. I went to a coffee shop 3 neighborhoods away just to hear another human voice. Even if it was just a barista asking if I wanted room for cream, I walked through a park. I sat on a bench and watched ducks fight over a piece of bread, feeling a strange kinship with the bird that got nothing. By the time the sun began to set, turning the sky a bruised purple, I decided I was done feeling sorry for myself. I went back to my apartment. I locked the door. I decided to reclaim the night. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered to the empty living room. I ordered a pad thai from the place on the corner. I put on my favorite oversized pajamas, and then, my eyes landed on the black box on the kitchen counter. The gift. I approached it with a mix of wariness and longing. The logical part of me, the part that analyzed risk for a living, told me to leave it in the box. But the emotional part of me, the part that had spent the entire day in a silent vacuum, wanted to bridge the gap. Blair had sent this. She had written, "Sorry for everything." If I didn't use it, wasn't I being the difficult one? Wasn't I being the person they accused me of being, ungrateful and hard to reach? I unpacked the diffuser. It was elegant, heavy, cool to the touch. I filled the reservoir with water from the tap. I opened the amber bottle labeled "Deep Breath." The smell was strong. It hit me the moment I twisted the cap. It was sharp, medicinal, like eucalyptus mixed with something sweeter. Cloying, almost like almond extract. I hesitated. "It is hypoallergenic," the label said. "Clean air formula." I added 5 drops to the water. I pressed the power button. A soft blue LED light glowed at the base, and a fine mist began to plume upward, dissolving into the air of my living room. I sat on the floor with my food, queuing up a movie. I took a deep breath. The scent was potent. It filled the room quickly, masking the smell of the takeout. "Here is to 25, I said, raising a glass of water to the television. 10 minutes passed. The first sign was a tickle. It started at the back of my throat, a dry scratching sensation. I coughed, once, to clear it. Then came the heat. A sudden flush rose up my neck, making my ears burn. I paused the movie. I swallowed. But my throat felt narrow. It felt like I had swallowed a spoonful of peanut butter that wouldn't go down. I stood up. "Okay," I said aloud. My voice sounded raspy. "Okay, maybe not." I walked over to the diffuser to turn it off. By the time I crossed the 10 feet of living room floor, the tickle had become a grip, It felt as though an invisible hand had reached inside my chest and squeezed my bronchial tubes shut. I turned off the machine. I unplugged it, but the mist was already in the air. It was in the curtains. It was in the rug. It was in me. I coughed again. Harder this time. It was an unproductive, barking cough. My lungs were spasming. I tried to inhale, to take a deep, cleansing breath, but the air stopped halfway down. It hit a wall. This was not anxiety. I knew anxiety. Anxiety was a fluttering heart and racing thoughts. This was mechanical failure. This was physiology. My lips started to tingle. A numbness spread across my face, like Novocaine moving under the skin. Inhaler. I turned and stumbled toward the bedroom. The distance seemed to have doubled. My vision was doing something strange. The periphery was blurring, darkening, creating a tunnel effect. The only thing in focus was the nightstand. I reached it. I grabbed the rescue inhaler I had checked the night before, the one that had felt too light. I didn't have time to worry about the weight now. I needed it to work. I brought it to my lips. I exhaled as much as I could, which was barely a whisper of air, and pressed the canister. Click. There was a sound. A hollow. Dry click. No spray. No cold rush of albuterol. Nothing. I stared at it. The room tilted. I shook it violently. I pressed it again. Click. Nothing. The horror that washed over me was colder than the lack of oxygen. It was empty. Completely empty. My chest clamped down. It wasn't just tight anymore. It was sealed. It felt like breathing through a wet cloth. I sucked in air. But nothing reached my lungs. I was drowning on dry land. I dropped the inhaler. It bounced on the carpet with a mockery of a sound. Phone. I needed my phone. I had left it on the sofa. I turned to go back to the living room. But my legs gave out. My muscles were screaming for oxygen. I fell to my knees, the impact jarring my spine. I couldn't stand up. I had to crawl. I dragged myself across the floorboards. The world was spinning. Sounds were becoming muffled, like I was underwater. The blue light from the television seemed aggressive, blinding. I reached the sofa. I clawed at the cushion until my phone slid off and hit the floor. I tapped the screen. My fingers were clumsy, numb. I hit the emergency button. I dialed 911. It rang. Once. Twice. 911. What is your emergency? Help, I wheezed. The word was barely audible. It was a scrape of sound. Asthma. Can't. Breathe, I gasped, trying to force the address out. 112 Elm. The voice on the other end didn't jump into action. The dispatcher didn't say, "Units are on the way." Instead, there was a pause, a distinct, hesitant pause. "Is this the resident at 112 Elm, apartment 4B?" the dispatcher asked. Her voice was calm, but it held a strange note of patience, the kind you use with a child throwing a fit. "Yes," I choked out. "Help." "Ma'am," the dispatcher said, "we have already received a call regarding this address. We have a report from your sister." My brain, starved of oxygen, tried to process this. My sister? Blair called? Was she watching me? Did she know? She called? I gasped. "Yes," the dispatcher continued. "She informed us that you might be calling. She stated that you are upset about a family event tonight and that you have a history of making false emergency calls for attention." The room went black for a second. I lay on the floor, the phone pressed to my ear, my lungs burning as if they were filled with acid. "No," I tried to scream, but it came out as a gurgle. "No." "She said you tend to fake these episodes when you are distressed," the dispatcher said, her voice firm now. "Ma'am, abuse of the 911 system is a crime. Are you actually in distress, or are you having a panic attack?" She told them I fake it. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Blair didn't just guess. She didn't just assume I would be dramatic. She knew. She knew I would call because she had sent the weapon that would force me to call. She had set the fire and then called the fire department to tell them it was a false alarm. "Dying," I whispered. I summoned every ounce of energy left in my dying cells. I am dying. The phone slipped from my hand. I couldn't hold it anymore. My vision narrowed until there was only a pinprick of light. The sound of the television faded. The sound of the dispatcher asking, "Ma'am? Ma'am?" faded. I was going to die. I was going to die on my floor, on my birthday. And the last thing recorded would be my sister telling the world I was a liar. I don't know how much time passed. It felt like seconds. It might have been minutes. I was drifting in a dark, cold sea. Then, sound returned. A siren. It was distant at first, then loud, then deafening. It stopped right outside. There was pounding on the door, shouting. "Fire department! Open the door!" I couldn't move. I couldn't answer. A crash. The sound of wood splintering. The lock giving way. Heavy boots on the floor. Voices. "In here! I have a visual. Female, 25, roughly. Cyanotic. Get the bag." Hands were on me. Strong hands. They turned me over. I looked up. My vision swimming. A face hovered above me. A man. He had dark hair and eyes that were wide with alarm. This was Nate Harlow. I saw his name tag later. But in that moment, he was just the person who was not letting me die. "She is not moving air," Nate shouted to his partner. "Lung sounds are absent. This is not a panic attack. She is locked down tight." He didn't ask me questions. He didn't ask if I was faking it. He saw the blue tint of my lips. He saw the terror in my eyes. He strapped a mask over my face. "I am pushing epi," he yelled. "Get the duo neb running, now." A sharp prick in my arm. Then, the hiss of the nebulizer. The first breath was agony. It felt like my lungs were tearing open. But air went in. I gasped, my body arching off the floor. "Easy," Nate said, his hand gripping my shoulder. "I have got you. Just breathe. Let the meds work." He watched me. He didn't look away. He watched the monitor. Then he watched my face. He saw the moment the color started to return to my skin. He saw the moment the terror began to recede, replaced by a shaking, violent rage. They loaded me onto the stretcher. I was weak, trembling uncontrollably from the epinephrine and the shock. As they wheeled me out of the apartment, I saw the black box on the counter. The diffuser was dark, but the smell still lingered. In the back of the ambulance, the noise of the world fell away, replaced by the hum of the engine and the rhythmic beep of the cardiac monitor. Nate sat beside me, filling out his chart. He looked up, and his expression was grim. "You are lucky we were close," he said quietly. "Another 5 minutes, and that epinephrine wouldn't have mattered." I pulled the mask away from my face for a second. My voice was a wreck. "Dispatch," said. Nate stopped writing. He looked at me, and I saw a flash of anger in his eyes. It wasn't directed at me. "Yeah," he said. "I heard the call come over the radio. They downgraded the priority because of the warning they received." He leaned in closer, his voice low, confidential. "Ma'am," he said, "I have been doing this for 10 years. I know what a panic attack looks like, and I know what anaphylaxis looks like." He paused, glancing at the driver to make sure he wasn't overheard. "That first call," Nate said, meeting my eyes with a chilling intensity. "The one from your sister?" It didn't sound like a worried relative. It sounded like someone trying to manage the story, not save your life. He let that sink in. "She knew exactly when to call," I whispered. Nate nodded slowly. "Yeah, it seems like she did." He put the mask back gently over my face. "Just breathe. We are almost to Mercy. You are safe now." But I knew I wasn't safe. I was alive, but I wasn't safe. I lay back against the harsh sheets of the stretcher, listening to the siren wail. It was a scream that I couldn't make. Blair hadn't just thrown a party. She had orchestrated an execution, and she had almost gotten away with it. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room recovery bay hummed with a sound that felt like a drill pressing into my temple. I was alive. That was the primary data point my brain kept trying to process. I was sitting upright. a nebulizer mask finally removed, my chest feeling bruised and hollowed out, but expanding and contracting on its own. But peace, as I was learning, was not on the menu. The curtain to my cubicle was ripped back with a violence that made the plastic rings shriek against the metal rod. "Oh my God! Bianca!" It was the performance of the season. Lillian Baker swept into the small room, her face a mask of tragic devastation. She was still wearing her outfit from the party, a structured navy silk gown that cost more than my car. Her makeup was flawless, save for a single artfully placed smudge of mascara beneath her left eye. It signaled distress without compromising aesthetics. She rushed to the bedside, her hands hovering over me but not actually touching me, as if she were afraid my clamminess might stain the silk. "We came as soon as we heard," she choked out, her voice pitching up just enough to carry to the nurse's station. "The doctor called us. We left the guests. We left everything." Behind her, Blair entered. She was carrying a massive bouquet of sterile, safe white roses, conveniently purchased from the hospital gift shop. Price tag still visible on the cellophane. She looked impeccable. Her hair was still in the intricate updo from the party, her diamonds catching the harsh medical light. She didn't look at me. She looked around the room, scanning for an audience. She spotted a nurse adjusting my IV drip. "I called immediately," Blair announced, her voice loud and clear, directed entirely at the nurse. "I just had this feeling, you know? Twin intuition. I told Mom, something is wrong with Bianca. I called 911 before we even got the call from the hospital. I just knew." I sat there, frozen. The audacity was breathtaking. It was a rewrite of history happening in real time. She was taking the very act that nearly killed me, her preemptive call to discredit me, and spinning it into a story of psychic sisterly love. The nurse smiled sympathetically. "That is amazing. She is lucky to have you." "I would do anything for her," Blair said, finally turning to look at me. Her eyes were dry. They were hard, glittering beads of calculation. "Anything." I looked at them. The old Bianca, the one from yesterday, would have screamed. She would have ripped the IV out of her arm and shouted, "You told them I was faking it. You told them to take their time." But the Bianca who had crawled across the floorboards gasping for air was gone. In her place was someone colder. Someone who realized that screaming at a narcissist is like feeding blood to a shark. It only excites them. I decided to give them what they wanted. I decided to play dead. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice rough and weak. I let my eyelids flutter. I am so tired." Lillian let out a sigh of relief. The problem was managed. The victim was compliant. "Of course you are." "Darling," Lillian said, patting the bedsheet near my foot. "It was a severe episode. The doctor said you need rest. We were so worried. But you are safe now." "We will handle everything," Blair added, setting the flowers on the rolling table. "Don't worry about the medical bills. We will figure it out. Just focus on getting better. We have to get back to the venue to say goodbye to the stragglers. But we will check on you tomorrow." They stayed for exactly 8 minutes. They took a photo of them holding my hand, for the social media update, obviously, and then they swirled out of the room in a cloud of expensive perfume and self-righteousness, leaving me alone with the hum of the lights. I waited. I stared at the clock on the wall. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, then the curtain moved again. It wasn't a doctor, it was Nate, the EMT who had saved me. He had changed out of his high-visibility jacket into a dark fleece. He looked tired, holding 2 coffees. He checked the hallway before slipping inside, pulling the curtain shut tight behind him. "You have got quite a family," Nate said, his voice low. He didn't sound impressed. He sounded like a man who had seen car wrecks that were less messy than my relatives. "They are theatrical," I rasped. Nate handed me one of the coffees. It was lukewarm, but the caffeine was necessary. He pulled the doctor's stool over and sat down, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. The professional distance was gone. This was off the record. "I brought your bag," Nate said, nodding to a plastic patient belongings sack in the corner. And I brought the box, the diffuser. I told the attending physician we needed to run a tox screen on the oil to see what triggered the anaphylaxis. It is standard procedure, so nobody questioned it. Thank you, I said. Did they test it? Lab is backed up, Nate said, but I took a look at it myself while I was writing up the report. Bianca, I have a question, and I need you to be honest with me. He looked me dead in the eye. How did she know you would be in danger tonight? I gripped the paper cup. She sent me the gift, the diffuser. I know that, Nate said, but the timing, the dispatch call came in at 8:05. Your call came in at 8:15. She called 10 minutes before you dropped. That means she knew exactly when you would turn that machine on. How? I thought back to the setup, the silence, the loneliness, the package arriving at the exact moment I would be home from work. She knows my routine, I said. She knows I am home by 6. She knows I unwind around 8. She knows I'm desperate for connection. She knew I would try it. Nate shook his head. It is too tight. 10 minutes is a hell of a gamble. Unless... He stood up and walked over to the plastic bag. He pulled out the black box, now bagged in a clear biohazard sack. He set it on the tray table. I looked at the shipping label, Nate said. On the surface, it looks like a standard overnight label from that wellness company. Eris Pure, but look at the edge. He pointed to the corner of the white sticker. It was slightly lifted, a tiny dog ear of paper. I have a habit of picking at things, Nate said grimly. I peeled it back a little. He carefully worked his fingernail under the top label. It came away with a sticky tearing sound. Underneath was not another shipping label, but a local courier sticker, a bright orange tag from a place called Metro City Rush Delivery. This didn't come from a warehouse in California, Nate said. This came from across town. It was dropped off by a local courier service about 2 hours before you got home. I stared at the orange tag. And look at the sender field on the bottom label. Nate pointed. It didn't say Eris Pure. It said P.O. Box 492. I googled the P.O. box, Nate said. It is a rental box at a shipping center 3 blocks from the country club where your sister's party is being held. My stomach turned over. She hadn't ordered it. She had prepped it. She had boxed it, labeled it with a fake brand sticker, and hired a local runner to drop it at my door to ensure the timing was precise. It gets worse, Nate said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out my rescue inhaler. He had bagged that too. I checked the weight, he said. You said you just refilled it? 3 weeks ago, I said. I barely used it. It is empty, Bianca, Nate said. Not low. Empty. There is 0 propellant in this canister. But here is the thing. It's empty. Completely. Someone swapped your full canister for a dead one. When did you last have people in your apartment? I closed my eyes, searching my memory. Nobody. I don't have guests. Then it hit me. The maintenance man, I whispered. What? Last Tuesday, I said, the memory sharpening into focus. The building manager emailed me, said there was a mandatory filter check for the HVAC system. A guy came while I was working from home. He was wearing a uniform. I let him in. He went into the bedroom to check the vent, which is right above my nightstand. Did you watch him the whole time? Nate asked. No, I said, feeling sick. I was on a conference call. I stayed in the living room. He was in there for maybe 5 minutes. 5 minutes is plenty of time to swap a canister, Nate said. Did you verify the visit with the building management? The email looked real, I said. But even as I said it, I knew. I knew just like I knew the apology note was fake. I grabbed my phone from the side table. I searched my inbox for the maintenance email. I found it. From buildingmt-support@gmail.com. Not the official building domain, a generic Gmail account. Oh my God, I breathed. They had someone break into my house. They didn't break in, Nate corrected. You invited them in. That is how they work. They use your trust against you." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "This isn't a prank. Bianca, this is conspiracy. They planted a chemical trigger. They removed your safety equipment, and they preloaded the police with a story to delay help. If I hadn't been 2 streets away, we would be having this conversation in a morgue." The reality of it settled over me like a shroud. I looked at the hospital door. I felt exposed. If they knew I was alive, and they did, what would they do next? Would they come back to check on me? Would they bring me a recovery smoothie laced with something else? "I can't stay here," I said. Panic was starting to rise again, but this time it was cold, calculating. "I can't go home. They have keys, maybe. If they sent a fake maintenance guy, did he unlock a window?" "You definitely can't go home," Nate agreed. "And you shouldn't stay here either. Once you are discharged, you are vulnerable." "I have cash," I said. "I keep an emergency fund in my safe. If I can get to the bank—" "Do it," Nate said. "Don't use your credit cards. If they are this organized, they might have alerts set up on your accounts. If your mother is on your bank account as a co-signer from when you were a teenager, she can track your location by the transactions." I nodded. I did have a joint account with Lillian that I used for transferring rent money. She could see every coffee I bought. "I will go to a motel," I said. "One of those places on the highway that takes cash and doesn't ask for ID. "Smart," Nate said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small business card. It was matte black with white text, no logo. Just a name and a number. Tessa Quinn, Digital Forensic Security. "Who is this?" I asked. "A friend," Nate said. "She used to work for the police department, in cybercrimes. She left because she got tired of the red tape. She specializes in domestic situations, high-conflict families, stalking, gaslighting." He pressed the card into my hand. "She knows how these people operate," Nate said. "She knows how to find the digital footprints they think they scrubbed. You need proof. Bianca, you can't just go to the police with a hunch and an empty inhaler. They will look at your sister's concern call and write you off as unstable. You need hard evidence." I looked at the card, then up at Nate. "Why are you helping me?" Nate hesitated. He looked at the door, then back at me. "My younger brother," he said quietly. He had asthma, too, and he had a girlfriend who liked to play games. One night, she hid his inhaler during an argument. He didn't make it. The silence in the room was heavy, filled with the weight of ghosts. "I am sorry," I said. "Don't be sorry," Nate said, his jaw tightening. "Be angry. Be smart. Call Tessa, and disappear until you have enough ammo to shoot back." He stood up. "I have to get back on shift. I left the diffuser in the bag. Take it. It is evidence. Don't let it out of your sight." He walked to the curtain, then paused. "Bianca?" "Yeah?" "Happy birthday," he said. It was the only honest birthday wish I had received all day. 2 hours later, I signed the discharge papers against the advice of the attending nurse, who thought I should stay for observation. I told her I had family at home, a lie, but a necessary one. I took an Uber to a bank 3 towns over. I withdrew $2,000 in cash, everything I could take without triggering a fraud alert. Then I threw my SIM card into a sewer grate. I walked 4 miles to a motel called the Sleep Ease Inn. It was the kind of place where the carpet smelled of stale smoke and regret, and the clerk behind the bulletproof glass didn't look up from his phone when I slid $300 across the counter for a week's stay. Room 104 was small, dark, and perfect. It was off the grid. I sat on the lumpy mattress, surrounded by the few things I had: my bag, the black box, and the empty inhaler. I felt like a fugitive. I pulled the business card Nate had given me out of my pocket. Tessa Quinn. I went to the room's landline phone. I dialed the number. It rang 3 times. "Quinn?" a voice answered. It was a woman's voice, sharp, clipped, efficient. "Hi," I said, my voice steady for the first time in 24 hours. "Nate Harlow gave me your number. He said you know how to find things that families try to hide. There was a pause on the other end, then the sound of a keyboard clacking. "If Nate sent you, you are in trouble," Tessa said. "Start from the beginning. And don't leave out the crazy parts. I specialize in crazy." "My sister tried to kill me for her birthday," I said, "and I think she left a digital trail." "They always do," Tessa said. "I am listening." I looked at the peeling label on the box. I looked at the empty inhaler, and for the first time, I didn't see tragedy. I saw evidence. The investigation had begun. Tessa Quinn did not look like a hacker, nor did she look like a detective. She looked like a librarian who had seen too much. She arrived at my motel room door at 10 o'clock in the morning, carrying a battered laptop case and a bag of bagels. She wore a heavy knit sweater and glasses that kept sliding down her nose, but her eyes were sharp, scanning the hallway, the parking lot, and the gap under the door before she even stepped inside. "Nice digs," she said dryly, looking at the peeling wallpaper of room 104. "At least it is off the grid, no Wi-Fi, right?" "I didn't connect to it," I said. "I threw my SIM card away." "Good girl," Tessa said. She cleared the small round table of my debris, the empty inhaler, the black box, and set up her station. "Nate briefed me. He says you are smart but currently in the shock phase. We need to move you to the hunter phase. To do that, we need access." She opened her laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dim room. "Nate said you think they planned this," Tessa said, her fingers flying over the keys. "Planned means communication. People like your mother and sister don't talk face-to-face if they can avoid it. They text, they email, they leave crumbs." "My mother is paranoid," I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "She shreds everything." "She shreds paper," Tessa corrected. "But narcissists love the cloud. They love backing things up because they think their lives are important history. Does your family have a shared drive? A family plan for data?" I paused. "We did, years ago. Mom set it up when I was in college. She called it the Baker Legacy Vault. She wanted to control our photo backups and document storage. She said it was for safety, but it was really so she could snoop on our pictures." "Did she ever remove you from it?" Tessa asked. "I doubt it," I said. "She probably forgot I was even on it, or she assumed I was too stupid to use it. She never changed passwords. She thought her first idea was always the best idea." "What was the password?" I closed my eyes, picturing Lillian's face, the arrogance, the pride. "Try Baker Best One," I said. "Capital B twice, the number 1. Tessa typed it in. She hit enter. For a second, the circle spun. Then, the screen flashed white. Folders appeared, rows and rows of them. "We are in," Tessa said, her voice flat. "Arrogance is always the best backdoor." I pulled my chair closer. The file structure was maniacally organized. Taxes, real estate, Blair's portfolio, medical. "Where do we look?" I asked. "We don't look at the files yet," Tessa said. "We look at the sync logs. We look for recent uploads and message backups, if they have iMessage syncing to the cloud. We can see everything." She clicked on a folder labeled Device Backups. She found Lillian's iPhone backup, updated 4 hours ago. Tessa ran a script to extract the message database. It took 5 minutes. The longest 5 minutes of my life. The room was silent except for the hum of the mini fridge and the pounding of my heart. "Got it," Tessa said. "Search query. Blair. Date range. Last 30 days. The screen filled with text bubbles. I started reading, and the blood drained from my face. It wasn't just mean. It wasn't just gossip. It was a production schedule for my destruction. January 15th. Lillian. I spoke to the estate planner. The new draft from Rosalind is problematic. If the old woman dies and Bianca is still listed as competent next of kin, the trust skips us. It goes directly to the grandchild. But since Blair has the instability clause in her history, it defaults to Bianca. Blair. So I get nothing? After everything I have done? Lillian. Not if Bianca is the issue. If Bianca is deemed unfit or unavailable, the executor bypasses her. We need to establish a pattern of instability for her. Real fast. I felt sick. Unavailable. January 20th. Blair. She is so boring. She never does anything risky. How do we make her look unstable? Lillian. We use her weakness, the asthma. If she has a major episode and refuses care, or delays care, it looks like self-sabotage. It looks like a psych issue. We need a trigger. Blair. I can send her something. That wellness crap she likes. I will find something with a high allergen load. Lillian. Make sure it looks expensive. She is desperate for approval. She will use it if she thinks it is a gift. I put my hand over my mouth. They had weaponized my loneliness. They knew exactly which button to push. Tessa scrolled down. Here, she said, pointing to a thread from 3 days ago. This is the smoking gun, January 31st. Lillian. The maintenance request is approved. I hired a guy. He is going in on Tuesday to check the filters. Blair. Did you tell him about the inhaler? Lillian. He knows what to do. He is swapping the canister. Make sure it won't work. She will try it first. By the time she realizes it is empty, the panic will set in. Physiology will do the rest. Blair. What if she calls 911 immediately? Lillian. You call first. You control the narrative. Tell them she is faking. Tell them she does this for attention. If they delay even 5 minutes, the hypoxia will cause confusion. She won't be able to speak clearly. She will look manic. I read the words again. Make sure it won't work. They weren't just hoping I would get sick, I whispered. They rigged the safety net to fail. Keep reading, Tessa said. Her face was grim. There is more. February 2nd. Blair. I got the label printed. I'm pasting it over the courier tag. Use the clean brand sticker. She will trust the look. She is such a sucker for branding. Lillian. Good. The party starts at 7. By 8, she should be home. By 8:30, we should have a problem. They had a timeline, I said, my voice shaking. They scheduled my death between cocktails and cake. Tessa clicked out of the messages. Okay, we have intent. We have conspiracy. But we need to nail the maintenance visit. If we can prove they had someone inside your apartment, we link the text to the physical act. She went back to the main directory. She opened a folder I hadn't noticed before. It was labeled Security. Inside, there were subfolders for Main House, Gate, and Lake House. But there was a new folder, created last week. It was labeled Tenant Cam. My heart stopped. Tenant Cam? I asked. I don't live in their house. Tessa clicked it open. There were video files, dozens of them. She clicked the most recent one. The video player opened. It was a high-angle shot. Grainy but clear enough. It showed a living room. My living room. I gasped. The camera angle was from the ceiling vent. They bugged your apartment, Tessa said. That maintenance man didn't just swap the inhaler. He installed a pinhole camera in the vent. On the screen, I saw myself. I saw myself walking into the apartment yesterday evening. I saw myself opening the black box. I saw myself setting up the diffuser. Tessa scrubbed the timeline. The file jumped back to Tuesday. The filter check. A man in a uniform stepped into my bedroom, reached up to the vent, and worked fast. 5 minutes. Enough to swap a canister. Enough to plant a camera. Stop it, I said, turning away. I can't watch. Tessa paused the video. Bianca, listen to me. This is disgusting. It is a violation. But this is the nail in the coffin. They recorded it. They wanted to watch. She clicked to another file. This one was audio only. It was a recording of a phone call. The metadata showed it was recorded on Lillian's phone yesterday afternoon. Tessa pressed play. Lillian's voice. Are we set? A man's voice. Heavy, unrecognizable. The feed is live. The canister is swapped. I put a block in the nozzle too, just in case there was any residue left. She won't get a single microgram. Lillian. Good. If she survives, we have the footage to show how erratic she was acting before the attack. We can edit it, Make it look like she took something. We will file for conservatorship within the week. The man. And the will? Lillian. If she is under conservatorship, she can't inherit. I become the trustee. The $2 million stays in the family. The recording ended. $2 million. I sat back in the flimsy motel chair, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't about me, I said. The realization was a cold, hard stone in my gut. It wasn't because they hated me. I mean, they do hate me. But that wasn't the reason. It was the money, Tessa said. Always follow the money. Rosalind must have changed the will, I said, putting the pieces together. She knew. She knew they would try to cut me out, so she structured it to bypass them. And because I am the steady one, she probably left me in charge of the estate. And that, Tessa said, made you dangerous. You weren't just the annoyance in the corner anymore. You were the gatekeeper to their lifestyle. I thought about the years of snide comments, the exclusion, the way they treated me like furniture. I had always thought it was emotional cruelty. I thought they just didn't like my personality. But it was never that deep, to them. I wasn't a person. I was an obstacle. I was a speed bump on the road to their inheritance. They weren't punishing me for being difficult. They were punishing me for being inconvenient. And for $2 million, they were willing to listen to me suffocate over a live video feed while they ate appetizers. What do we do? I asked. We have everything. We have the texts, the video, the audio. We build a package, Tessa said. She pulled an encrypted hard drive from her bag. I am going to clone this entire directory. I am going to preserve the metadata so they can't claim these are deep fakes. I am going to generate a chain of custody report that shows exactly how we accessed it and when. She looked at me, her expression serious. This isn't for gossip, Bianca. This isn't to show your aunts and uncles to make them feel bad. This is for a district attorney. This is for a grand jury. We are building a lethal injection of truth. Do it, I said. There is one more thing, Tessa said, tapping the screen. Look at the date on the will discussion. January 15th. Okay? That is the day after your grandmother had her stroke. Tessa said. Lillian didn't just react to the will. She knew about the will before Rosalind got sick. She was monitoring Rosalind's communications too. I felt a fresh wave of nausea. You think they did something to Grams? Tessa shook her head. I don't have proof of that, yet, but if they were willing to do this to you for $2 million, I wouldn't rule anything out. She started the download. The progress bar moved slowly across the screen. 1%, 2%. I watched it. Every percentage point was a layer of my denial stripping away. I had spent 25 years wanting to be part of the Baker family. I had wanted their love. I had wanted their approval. Now, looking at the digital anatomy of their betrayal, I realized that not belonging to them was the only thing that had saved me. If I had been closer, if I had been trusted, I might never have noticed the trap. Tessa, I said. Yeah? When we are done here, I said, my voice steady, cold, and final. I don't just want to survive. I want to make sure they never hurt anyone again, Tessa smiled. It was a sharp, predatory smile. Welcome to the hunter phase, Bianca. Let's finish this download. The room was quiet, save for the hum of the laptop on the screen. The files transferred one by one. Evidence, proof, truth. I reached into my pocket and touched the empty inhaler. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the witness, and I was about to take the stand. The landline in my motel room rang at 2:00 in the afternoon. It was a jarring, mechanical sound that seemed to vibrate against the peeling wallpaper. I stared at it for a moment. Only 2 people knew where I was, Nate and Tessa. If the phone was ringing, the next phase of the operation was beginning. I picked up the receiver. Hello? Bianca Baker? The voice was male, deep, and sounded like it had been eroded by decades of arguing with people who didn't listen. Yes, I said. This is Elliot Carver, the voice said. I believe you found a note from your grandmother referencing me. Nate Harlow contacted my office an hour ago. He said you are alive, and that you are ready to talk. I am, I said, my grip tightening on the handset. I need to know what she left me. I need to know if I have the power to stop them. Not over the phone, Carver said. Can you get to my office? It is on 4th and Main. Suite 2B. It is not hard to find. But the elevator is slow. Take the stairs. I will be there in 20 minutes, I said. I grabbed my bag, checking to make sure the encrypted hard drive Tessa had given me was safely zipped in the inner pocket. It felt heavy, not in ounces, but in implication. It was the nuclear football of the Baker family, and I was the one carrying the launch codes. Elliot Carver's office was the antithesis of everything my mother valued. It was not in a glass-walled skyscraper with a view of the river. It was in a brick walk-up sandwiched between a tailor and a dusty bookstore. The waiting room didn't have a receptionist or a sleek espresso machine. It had a desk piled high with manila folders and a coat rack that looked like it was holding up the ceiling. It smelled of old paper, lemon furniture oil, and integrity. Carver opened the door himself. He was a man in his late 60s, wearing a suit that was well-made but clearly 10 years old. He had intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of face that didn't smile just to be polite. Ms. Baker, he said, extending a hand. I am glad to finally meet the steady one. Rosalind spoke of you often. Hearing him use her nickname for me made my throat tight. Thank you for seeing me. Mr. Carver? Call me Elliot, he said, ushering me into his office. And there was never a question of seeing you. I have been waiting for this call for 2 years. He sat behind a heavy oak desk that was scarred with scratches and rings from coffee mugs. He didn't waste time with small talk. He didn't ask me how I was feeling after my near-death experience. He treated me like a client who was there to do business, which was exactly the respect I needed. Let's get right to it, Elliot said. He opened a thick file on his desk. Your mother and sister believe they are operating under the 2018 estate plan. That plan split the assets 3 ways between Lillian, Blair, and yourself, with Lillian acting as the primary trustee until Rosalind's death, at which point Lillian would assume full executorship. That is what they think, I said. That is why they felt safe trying to kill me. They thought if I was gone, my share would just dissolve back into the pot for them. Correct, Elliot said. However, 2 years ago, on a Sunday afternoon, Rosalind came to this office. She was upset. She had been at a family brunch earlier that day. She went to the kitchen to get more tea and overheard a conversation between your mother and your sister in the dining room. I leaned forward. What did she hear? Elliot looked down at his notes. She heard Lillian tell Blair, "Don't worry about Bianca's share. Once Mother is gone, we will find a way to declare her incompetent. We will put her in a facility if we have to. The money belongs to people who know how to use it." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty window. They had been planning this for years. The inhaler swap wasn't a sudden crime of opportunity. It was just the latest iteration of a long-standing strategy. Rosalind was devastated, Elliot continued, but she was also furious. She realized that her passive hope for family unity was actually endangering you. So, she drafted a new will and a new trust structure. He turned the file around and slid it across the desk toward me. The house, Elliot said. The entire property, including the contents, is left to you. Sole ownership, no trust, no oversight from your parents. I stared at the document. The house, the place where I had always been a guest, never a member. And the liquid assets? I asked. The bulk of the estate, roughly $2.5 million, is placed in a trust, Elliot said. You are the sole beneficiary. But here is the kicker, and this is where Rosalind was brilliant. He pointed to a paragraph on the 3rd page. She added a bad actor clause. Elliot explained. It states that if any family member attempts to contest the will, or if there is documented evidence of misconduct, harassment, or interference with the beneficiary's well-being, They are automatically disinherited from any residual legacies. That means if they come after you, they lose the small stipends she left them. They will say she was crazy, I said immediately. Lillian's first move will be to claim Grams had dementia when she signed this. She will say I manipulated her. Elliot smiled. It was a dry, thin smile. We anticipated that, the same day she signed this. Rosalind underwent a comprehensive cognitive evaluation with a forensic psychiatrist. We recorded the session. She recites the current events, she does complex math, and she explicitly explains why she is cutting them out. She looks into the camera and says, I am doing this because my daughter Lillian values control more than her own children, and I will not finance her cruelty. I sat back in the leather chair. It was ironclad. It was a fortress of paper that Rosalind had built around me while I was busy thinking she didn't notice my pain. She protected me, I whispered. She did, Elliot said. But now we have a choice to make about how we execute this. He took off his glasses and cleaned them with a handkerchief. The quiet path is simple, he said. We file the probate documents tomorrow. We send a courier to your parents' house with a cease and desist letter and a copy of the will. We transfer the titles. You take the money. You sell the house if you want, and you move to Europe. You never have to see them again. The law handles the noise. It sounded tempting. The idea of just vanishing, of taking the money and starting a life where the name Baker meant nothing, was seductive. I could disappear. I could be safe. But then I thought about the text messages Tessa had found. I thought about the phrase, make sure it won't work. I thought about Blair telling the nurse she had twin intuition while I was lying in a hospital bed recovering from the poison she sent me. If I took the quiet path, they would spin it. Lillian would tell everyone I stole the inheritance. Blair would cry on TikTok about how her unstable sister manipulated a dying woman. They would keep the narrative. They would remain the victims, and I would remain the villain. Just a rich one. No, I said. Elliot stopped cleaning his glasses. He looked at me. No? I don't want the quiet path, I said. Quiet is what they want. Quiet is how they get away with it. They thrive in the shadows. Elliot, they rely on the fact that I am too polite to make a scene. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street. People were walking by, oblivious to the war being planned in the office above them. I want a meeting, I said, turning back to him. I want a family meeting, but not at their house. I want it at the hospital, in Rosalind's room. Elliot raised an eyebrow. That is highly irregular. Your grandmother is in a coma. She is unconscious, but she is alive, I said. And that is where the truth needs to come out, in front of her. I want witnesses. I want the doctors there. I want you there. And I want them to walk in thinking they are about to win, only to realize they have lost everything. Elliot studied me for a long moment. He was measuring me, assessing whether this was a tantrum or a strategy. He must have seen the resolve in my posture, because he slowly nodded. It is theatrical, he admitted, but it is not illegal. If we frame it as a necessary disclosure meeting regarding emergency medical decisions, they will have to come, and since Blair is currently posing as the proxy, she can't refuse. Exactly, I said. They think they are in charge. Let's let them keep thinking that until the door closes. I can arrange it, Elliot said, opening his calendar. I can have the hospital administrator present to witness the transfer of the proxy status. We can do it tomorrow afternoon. Are you sure you can handle facing them? After what they did? I touched the pocket where the hard drive sat. I am not just facing them, Elliot. I am presenting evidence. Very well, Elliot said. He picked up his phone. I will call the hospital legal department. You make the call to your sister. I took a deep breath. This was the first move of the endgame. I pulled my burner phone from my bag. I dialed Blair's number. I had deleted it from my contacts. But my fingers remembered the pattern. It rang 4 times. She was probably screening calls, waiting for more birthday praise. Hello? Her voice was crisp, guarded. She didn't recognize the number. Blair, I said. I kept my voice flat, devoid of the rage that was boiling in my blood. It is Bianca. There was a pause, a thick, heavy silence. Bianca? She sounded shocked, then immediately switched to her fake concern voice. Oh my God, where are you? We went to the hospital this morning and they said you checked out against medical advice. Mom is frantic. We have been worried sick. I am fine, I said, cutting off her performance. I just needed some air. I stayed with a friend. You can't just run off like that, she scolded. You are so irresponsible. We have been dealing with the fallout of your little scene all day. I know, I said. Look, I am sorry. I wasn't thinking straight. I let the apology hang there. I knew she would snatch it up. She loved being right. Well, at least you admit it, she sighed. So, where are you? Are you coming home? Not yet, I said. But we need to meet. I just got a call from a lawyer. A Mr. Carver. Who? Her tone sharpened instantly. Elliot Carver, I said. He says he is Graham's attorney. He contacted me because, well, he said there is an issue with the will. He wants to meet with the whole family. He said something about distributing the assets immediately due to her condition. I could practically hear the greed activating in her brain, the dopamine hit of the word assets. Immediately? Blair asked. I thought we had to wait until, apparently not, I lied. He said there is a clause that releases funds for medical care and family support now, but we all have to be there to sign off. He wants to do it at the hospital tomorrow at 2:00. In Graham's room. 2:00, Blair repeated. She was already mentally spending the money. Did he say how much? He mentioned something about 7 figures, I said. Okay, Blair said, her voice breathless. Okay, yes, we will be there. I will tell Mom. You are going to be there, right? You have to sign. I will be there, I said. I wouldn't miss it. Good, Blair said. And Bianca? Try to look presentable. Don't wear sweatpants. This is a legal meeting. Don't worry. Blair, I said. I will be dressed for the occasion. I hung up. I looked at Elliot. He was watching me with a look of newfound respect. You are good at this, he observed. I learned from the best, I said, standing up. My mother taught me how to lie. She just never thought I would use it on her. I will see you at the hospital at 2, Elliot said. I will bring the paperwork. You bring the fire. Oh, I am bringing more than fire, I said, patting the hard drive again. I am bringing the flood. I walked out of the modest brick building and into the sunlight. The air felt cleaner than it had in years. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking into a room wondering if I belonged. I was walking into a room to decide who got to stay. The trap was set. The cheese was the money. The rat was my sister. And tomorrow, the trap would snap shut. Room 402 at Lakeview Mercy Medical Center was not designed to hold a congregation. But by 2:00 on Wednesday afternoon, it felt less like a hospital room and more like a sardine tin packed with tension. I had arrived early, positioning myself in the corner near the window, next to Elliot Carver. From this vantage point, I watched the cast of characters assemble. My extended family had filtered in over the last 20 minutes. There was Aunt Sarah, Lillian's sister, who always looked at me with a vague, watery pity. There was Uncle Robert, a man who measured respect in stock portfolio size. There were cousins I hadn't spoken to since Christmas 3 years ago, all of them checking their watches, clearly wondering why they had been summoned for a legal emergency. They were the audience, and they were about to witness a play they hadn't bought tickets for. At 2:05, the doors swung open. Lillian and Blair entered. They were dressed as if they were already attending the funeral. Lillian wore a structured black dress with a high collar, her face pale and composed, radiating a stoic, brave suffering. Blair was in charcoal gray, clutching a designer handkerchief, her eyes red-rimmed, likely from irritation rather than tears. They had clearly coordinated their outfits to project a unified front of somber elegance. They stopped dead when they saw the crowd. Lillian's eyes swept the room, taking in her siblings, the cousins, and finally, me. Her gaze landed on me like a physical slap. I was standing straight, wearing a navy blazer and slacks, dry-eyed and steady. I wasn't the broken, wheezing mess she expected. "What is this?" Lillian asked, her voice tight. She stepped further into the room, her heels clicking on the linoleum. "Why is everyone here? We were told this was a meeting about the proxy." "It is," I said calmly. Lillian ignored me and turned to Aunt Sarah. "Sarah, I am so sorry you were dragged into this. Bianca is having a difficult week. She is very confused." She was doing it already, before the coats were even off. She was painting the narrative. "We are here because the lawyer called us." "Lillian," Uncle Robert said, looking impatient. "He said it concerns Mother's estate." Lillian turned to Elliot Carver, who was sitting quietly by the bedside of my unconscious grandmother. She looked him up and down, dismissing his scuffed briefcase and off-rack suit with a single sneer. "I don't know who you are," Lillian said. "But my mother's attorney is Gerald Fitzpatrick. We have used him for 30 years. If you are some ambulance chaser Bianca dug up—" "I am Elliot Carver," he interrupted. His voice wasn't loud, but it had the weight of a gavel striking wood. "I have been Rosalind Klein's retained counsel for the last 2 years. Gerald was fired in 2024. If you had checked the public filing records, you would know that—" Lillian blinked, the first crack in the armor. "That is ridiculous," Blair snapped, stepping up beside her mother. "Grams tells us everything. She never mentioned you." "Perhaps," Elliot said, opening a thick leather binder on his lap. "She felt some things were better kept private. Shall we begin?" Lillian straightened her spine. She walked to the foot of the bed, placing her hand on the railing, physically claiming the space. "Fine, let's get this over with, so we can get back to caring for Mother. As her daughter and primary caregiver, I assume this is about releasing funds for her treatment. Blair is the medical proxy, so she will sign whatever is needed." "Blair is not the proxy," Elliot said. The room went silent. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor seemed to get louder. "Excuse me?" Blair said, her voice shrill. "I was appointed yesterday." "You were appointed by your mother," Elliot corrected. "However, Rosalind appointed her own proxy 2 years ago. The document is on file with the hospital legal department as of this morning. The durable power of attorney for healthcare and finances belongs to Bianca Baker." Lillian let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Bianca? That is absurd. Bianca is unwell. She had a psychotic break just 2 days ago. She was hospitalized for a severe asthma attack that was self-induced. She is unstable." She turned to the family, her hands open in appeal. "You all know Bianca. You know how she gets. She forgets to take her meds. She spirals. She panics. We cannot trust her with Mother's life. She can barely manage her own." Aunt Sarah looked at me, concern etched on her face. "Bianca, honey, is that true? Were you in the hospital?" "I was," I said. My voice was clear. It carried to the back of the room. "But I wasn't there because I forgot my meds. I was there because my medication was tampered with." "Oh, stop it!" Blair shouted. She threw her hands up. "See? This is what she does. Paranoia. Delusions. She thinks everyone is out to get her. It is pathetic. Honestly." "Sit down, Ms. Baker," Elliot commanded. He didn't shout, but the authority in his tone made Blair freeze. "We are not here to debate medical histories. We are here to read the last will and testament and the living trust terms, which are triggered by Rosalind's incapacitation." "Will?" Lillian narrowed her eyes. "She isn't dead. The trust activates upon incapacity," Elliot explained, "and since the doctors have declared her vegetative with less than 1% chance of recovery, the assets are being distributed to the trustee to manage her care." He pulled a document from the binder. "Under the previous will, the estate was divided equally," Elliot began. "However, the document dated January 15th, 2024, revokes all prior arrangements." Lillian crossed her arms. She looked like she was tolerating a boring sermon. "Go on." "The family home at 12 Elm Street," Elliot read, "including all contents, jewelry, and personal effects, is bequeathed solely to Bianca Marie Baker. Lillian's arms dropped. What? The investment portfolio, Elliot continued, valued at approximately $2,400,000, is placed in a trust for the sole benefit of Bianca Marie Baker. Blair made a sound like she had been punched in the stomach. 2 million. Wait, no, that is wrong. And finally, Elliot read, Lillian Baker and Blair Baker are explicitly disinherited, receiving a token sum of $100 each to prevent any claims of accidental omission. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum, sucking the air out of the room. Then, the explosion happened. Fraud! Blair screamed. She lunged toward the bed, pointing a shaking finger at me. She made her do it. She manipulated her. Grams was old. She didn't know what she was signing. Bianca probably cried and guilt-tripped her until she signed everything over. This is elder abuse. It is coercion, Lillian hissed, her face turning a dangerous shade of red. Mother has been slipping for years. If she signed this in 2024, she was already confused. We will contest this. We will drag this through every court in the state. You won't see a dime. Bianca, I will bury you in legal fees. You can try, Elliot said calmly, but you should hear the statement of intent first. He pulled out a single sheet of cream-colored stationery. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Rosalind wrote this letter to be read in the event of a contest, Elliot said. She wanted her reasons to be public. Lillian looked at the letter as if it were a knife. I don't want to hear her ramblings. I think the rest of the family does, Uncle Robert said. His voice was grim. He was looking at Lillian with a new expression. Suspicion. Elliot began to read. To my family, he read. I know this division of assets will cause anger, but I have not made this decision lightly. I have watched this family for 25 years. I have watched Lillian treat love like a transaction. I have watched Blair learn that affection is something you perform for an audience. Blair gasped. And I have watched Bianca, Elliot continued. I have watched her show up, not for the money, not for the credit, but because she cared. Lillian, you showed up for leverage. Blair, you showed up for the inheritance. Bianca showed up for me. And when people love you, they don't make you audition. Elliot looked up. Therefore, I am leaving my legacy to the only person who understands what a legacy actually is. It is not money, it is character. Lillian was trembling, not with sorrow, but with a vibrating, incandescent rage. She stepped toward me, her eyes black with hate. You poisoned her against us, Lillian spat. You little snake. You spent all those afternoons drinking tea and whispering lies in her ear. You played the victim, and she bought it. Well, it won't work. The courts will see right through you. You are mentally unstable. You are an asthmatic shut-in who can't even breathe without help. You think a judge is going to give you $2 million? Actually, I said, stepping forward, I don't think the judge will care about my asthma, but I think he will care about the attempted murder. Lillian froze. Excuse me? You keep talking about me being unstable, I said, my voice rising just enough to command the room. You keep telling everyone I fake my attacks. You told the dispatch operator I was faking it on my birthday, didn't you, Blair? Blair looked around wildly. I was worried. I thought you were panicking. No, I said. You weren't worried. You were on a schedule. I nodded to Elliot. He turned the laptop on the bedside table around so the screen faced the room. What is this? Lillian demanded. This, I said, is the package you prepared for the district attorney, but I thought the family should see it first. I hit the spacebar. I turned the laptop toward the room. I didn't read it out loud. I let them see it. Then I clicked the next file. The audio recording. Lillian. Make sure it won't work. She will try it first. Blair. I got the label printed. Use the clean brand sticker. She will trust the look. The room erupted in gasps. Uncle Robert stepped closer, squinting at the screen. Lillian? Is that your number? It is fake, Lillian shrieked. She photoshopped it. Anyone can fake a text message. Can anyone fake this? I asked. I clicked the next file, the audio recording. Lillian's voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. If she is under conservatorship, she can't inherit. The $2 million stays in the family, the man's voice. The canister is swapped. I put a block in the nozzle too. She won't get a single microgram. Lillian's face went white. It wasn't a gradual draining of color. It was instant, like a light being switched off. She staggered back, clutching the bed rail. Blair looked at the screen, then at the door. I saw the instinct to run fire in her eyes. That isn't me, Blair stammered. I didn't say that. We have the video too, I said, mercilessly. From the camera you installed in my vent, the one you watched while you were at your party. Do you want me to play the clip where I'm crawling on the floor dying while you ignore the alert on your phone? I didn't have to play it. The threat was enough. The room fractured. Aunt Sarah put her hand over her mouth and backed away from Lillian as if she were contagious. Lillian? Oh my God. You did that? She is my daughter, Lillian screamed, the mask finally shattering completely. She spun around. Her face twisted into a snarl that looked nothing like the polished matriarch. I was trying to protect the family. She would have wasted it. She is weak. She has always been weak. She pointed at me, her finger shaking. You ungrateful little brat. I gave you life. I put a roof over your head. And you steal my inheritance? It wasn't yours, I said coldly. It never was. I earned it, Lillian roared. She lunged at me, her hands hooked into claws. Uncle Robert caught her. He grabbed her by the arms and held her back. Lillian, stop it. My God, look at yourself. Get off me, Lillian thrashed against him, her voice cracking into a sob that sounded more like frustration than grief. You don't understand. We have debts. The house is leveraged. We needed that money. The truth finally spilled out. It wasn't just greed. It was desperation. They were broke. The parties, the cars, the clothes. It was all a facade funded by credit they couldn't pay, waiting for Rosalind to die so they could cover the holes. Blair saw the ship sinking and decided to jump. It was her idea, Blair shouted, pointing at Lillian. She backed toward the door, tears streaming down her face. Real tears this time. Tears of terror. She made me do it. She said we would lose the house. I didn't want to hurt Bianca. Mom told me to send the box. She made me call 911. You little traitor, Lillian screamed, struggling against Uncle Robert's grip. You wrote the texts. You hired the courier. I am 25, Blair sobbed, looking at the cousins who were now filming this on their phones. I was scared. She is my mother. I just did what I was told. I watched them turn on each other. It was pathetic. It was inevitable. Wolves will eat their own when the meat runs out. Elliot Carver stood up and closed the laptop. I think we have seen enough. Get out, I said. Lillian stopped struggling. She looked at me, her hair messed, her chest heaving. Bianca, get out, I repeated. And don't go home. The police are waiting there with a warrant for the rest of your devices. Lillian's eyes went wide. She looked at Wade, who had been standing in the corner the entire time, silent as a ghost. Wade, she cried, do something. Tell her she can't do this to us. But Wade didn't move. He didn't step forward to defend his wife. He didn't step forward to comfort his daughter. He just looked at them, and for the first time in my life, I saw something in his eyes other than apathy. I saw shame. Go, I said to Lillian, before I have security drag you out. Lillian straightened her jacket. She tried to pull the shreds of her dignity around her, but it was too late. Everyone had seen the monster underneath. She looked at me one last time, her eyes burning with a promise of vengeance, and then she turned and marched out the door. Blair followed her, sobbing into her hands, not looking at anyone. The door clicked shut. The room was deadly silent. Aunt Sarah was crying softly in the corner. Uncle Robert looked at me, then at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. I turned to Rosalind. She was still sleeping, oblivious to the war that had just been fought over her body. I took her hand. It was still warm. "It is done. Grams," I whispered. "The audition is over." The heavy door to room 402 had barely clicked shut behind my mother and sister when the silence of the room was shattered. It did not break with a shout or a sob, but with a sound far more piercing, the rapid, escalating rhythm of the cardiac monitor. Beep, 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 beep. The jagged green line on the screen spiked. The nurse, who had been standing quietly by the window, surged forward. "Her heart rate is climbing," the nurse said, checking the readouts. "She is coming up. She is surfacing." The commotion was loud enough to penetrate the heavy wood of the door. Before I could even process the hope flaring in my chest, the door swung open again. Lillian and Blair rushed back in, their faces flushed, their earlier retreat forgotten in the face of a new opportunity. If Rosalind was dying, they needed to be seen weeping at the bedside. If she was waking, they needed to be the first faces she saw to spin their narrative. "Mother!" Lillian gasped, pushing past Uncle Robert to get to the rail. She shoved her way into the space I had been occupying. "Mother, can you hear me? I am here. Lillian is here." I watched, paralyzed for a split second by the sheer shamelessness of it. Just moments ago, she had been screaming about her inheritance. Now, she was the devoted daughter again, her voice dripping with a saccharine, desperate tenderness. "It is okay, Mom," Lillian cooed, reaching out to stroke Rosalind's forehead. "We are all here. You had a terrible scare, but we are taking care of everything." Then, the miracle happened. Rosalind Klein opened her eyes. They were not the glassy, unfocused eyes of a patient lost in the fog of a stroke. They were clear, they were sharp, and they were fixed directly on Lillian. The room held its breath. The only sound was the steadying beep of the monitor and the hum of the air conditioning. Lillian smiled, a trembling, terrified smile. "Oh, thank God. Mother, look at me. It is Lillian. I have been so worried. Bianca. Bianca has been causing such a scene. But don't worry, I handled it." Rosalind stared at her. She didn't blink. She looked like a judge who had already written the verdict and was just waiting for the defendant to stop lying. Her lips parted. Her voice was a rasp, dry as autumn leaves, but it cut through the room like a blade. "Stop," Lillian froze, her hand hovering in midair. "Mother?" "Stop," Rosalind repeated. The word was stronger this time, fueled by a reservoir of will that defied medical explanation. "I heard. You..." Lillian paled. "You heard me? Darling, I just got here. I was just telling you." "No," Rosalind rasped. She took a ragged breath, her chest rising painfully. "Before the kitchen, 2 years ago, I heard you." Lillian recoiled as if she had been slapped. The memory Elliot had described, the brunch, the overheard conversation about cutting me out, was not just a lawyer's theory. It was a fact, confirmed by the woman who had lived it. Rosalind turned her head slowly, painfully, until her eyes found mine. The hardness in her gaze melted instantly, replaced by a profound, sorrowful warmth. "Bianca," she whispered. I stepped forward, my legs trembling. I bypassed Lillian, who was too stunned to block me. I took Rosalind's hand. It was frail, the skin like tissue paper, but her grip tightened around my fingers with surprising strength. "I knew," Rosalind said, her voice gaining a fraction more volume. "I knew. They would come for you." Tears pricked my eyes, hot and fast. "You protected me. Grams, you saved me. You saved yourself," she breathed. Then she looked back at Lillian and Blair, who was cowering near the door. "Get Out. Mother, please, Lillian begged, the desperation clawing at her throat. You are confused. You have had a stroke. You don't know what you are saying. I know, Rosalind said. I know. You. That simple sentence was the final nail. I know you. It was an indictment of Lillian's entire character. It stripped away the pretense of the dutiful daughter and left the greedy, hollow woman underneath exposed for the entire family to see. I squeezed Rosalind's hand, feeling the connection that had anchored me for 25 years. I looked at my mother, then at my sister. I looked at the fear in their eyes, not fear of losing a loved one, but fear of consequences. It is over, Lillian, I said. My voice was steady, grounded in the truth I had finally accepted. I am done auditioning for love, and I am done paying for my seat at your table. Lillian opened her mouth to scream, to threaten, to launch one last attack, but Elliot Carver stepped forward. I believe the lady asked you to leave, Elliot said. And now that Ms. Klein is responsive, I am formally activating the protective clause of the trust. Based on the documented evidence of misconduct presented today, and confirmed by the grantor herself, you are hereby disinherited, effective immediately. You can't do this, Blair shrieked. I have rights. Actually, a new voice spoke from the hallway. You have the right to remain silent. The crowd parted as a woman in a sharp blazer and a badge on her belt walked in. It was Detective Reina Alvarez. She had been waiting in the corridor, invited by Elliot and Tessa to receive the evidence package properly. She walked straight up to Blair. Blair Baker? Detective Alvarez asked. Blair looked around wildly, like a trapped animal. What? No, I didn't do anything. We have a warrant for your arrest, Alvarez said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from her belt. Charges include reckless endangerment, tampering with a medical device, filing a false police report, and conspiracy to commit assault. Blair scrambled back, knocking over a tray of medical supplies. No, it wasn't me. It was her. She pointed a shaking finger at Lillian. She made me do it. I was forced. She said she would cut me off if I didn't help her. We have the text messages, Ms. Baker, Alvarez said calmly, spinning Blair around and snapping the cuffs on her wrists. We saw the thread where you suggested the clean brand label to trick your sister, and we saw the message where you told your mother to make sure the inhaler wouldn't work. That doesn't look like coercion. That looks like collaboration. Mom! Blair screamed as Alvarez began to march her out. Mom, help me! Don't let them take me! Lillian stood frozen, watching her favorite daughter, her mirror image, being hauled away. She didn't move to help. She didn't offer to pay for a lawyer. She just stared, her face a mask of absolute shock. Mrs. Baker, Alvarez said, pausing at the door and looking back at Lillian. We will be needing you to come down to the station for questioning as well. We are executing a search warrant on your home for the surveillance equipment. I suggest you drive yourself over before we have to send a car. Lillian looked at Wade. She looked at the husband she had bullied and silenced for 3 decades. Wade, she whispered. The car keys. Wade Baker was standing by the window. He looked at his wife. He looked at his daughter in handcuffs. And then he looked at me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the keys to the Mercedes. He looked at them for a long moment, as if realizing they were the only thing he actually owned in this marriage. He walked over to Lillian. He took her hand and placed the keys in her palm. You can drive yourself, Wade said. His voice was quiet, rusty from disuse, but it was final. I am not going with you. Lillian stared at him. What? I am done, Lillian, Wade said. I saw the signs. For years. I saw how you treated Bianca. I saw the cruelty, and I looked away because it was easier. I let you do this. That makes me guilty too. He turned to me. I am so sorry. Bianca, I know that isn't enough, but I will file for separation tomorrow, and I will testify to everything I saw you endure. Lillian stood alone in the center of the room. Her family had abandoned her. Her money was gone. Her daughter was in cuffs. Her husband was leaving. The control she had worshipped her entire life had evaporated, leaving her with nothing but the echo of her own malice. She made a sound, a choked, wounded noise, and then turned and ran out of the room, her heels clacking frantically down the hallway, chasing a life that no longer existed. The room exhaled. I looked down at Rosalind. She was exhausted, her eyes drooping, but she was smiling. "Rest now, Grams," I whispered. "We are safe." The investigation took 3 months. The evidence Tessa and Nate compiled was irrefutable. Blair, terrified of prison time, took a plea deal and turned on Lillian, providing details about the planning that even I hadn't guessed. Lillian was facing charges for unlawful surveillance and conspiracy. Her reputation in the community shattered beyond repair. She lost the country club membership, the friends, and the status she prized above all else. I moved into Rosalind's house on the 1st of March. It is a beautiful house, filled with light and the smell of old books. I didn't change much, but I did change the locks, and I cleared out the guest room that used to be reserved for Blair and turned it into an office for my new consulting business. I sat on the back porch this morning, drinking tea from one of Rosalind's china cups. The garden is starting to bloom. The air is full of pollen, but I'm not afraid of it anymore. I have a new specialist, a new treatment plan, and a nebulizer that sits on my nightstand like a guardian. Not a threat. I am not alone. Nate comes over for dinner on Tuesdays. We aren't dating. Not really. But there is a quiet understanding between us. A bond forged in the back of an ambulance that is slowly turning into something softer. Tessa stops by to check my cybersecurity and eat my cooking. Uncle Robert and Aunt Sarah have started inviting me to Sunday lunches, trying to bridge the gap of years of silence. And Wade calls. We are working on it. He is living in a small apartment downtown, learning how to be a person instead of a shadow. It is awkward, and sometimes painful, but it is real. My 26th birthday is coming up next year. I'm already planning it. It won't be a gala. It won't have a tent or a string quartet. It will be a dinner party at the big oak table in Rosalind's dining room. There will be lasagna. There will be cheap wine. And there will be about 10 people. My chosen family. People who know my coffee order. People who know when I'm tired. People who would never, ever make me audition for their love. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine. My lungs expanded fully, without resistance, without fear. They tried to take my breath away. They tried to edit me out of the picture, but they forgot that I was the one holding the camera all along. The best revenge wasn't ruining their party. It was surviving the version of me they tried to erase. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment down below and share your thoughts on the Baker family. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more justice being served, please subscribe to the Jane Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that subscribe button to help this story reach more people who need to hear it. Stay safe, stay steady, and I will see you in the next one.